Cup, brought to you by the Nickel Plate. Sit, sip, savor, and shop.
Good morning, everyone. It's 8 o'clock on the start of your Thursday morning. You are looking live at Tropicana Field this morning in St. Petersburg, Florida. This is where first responders, linemen were all being housed to help now that Hurricane Milton has passed through. But what you see is similar and eerily reminiscent of what happened in 2005 at the Superdome in New Orleans with Hurricane Katrina. The roof ripped to shreds.
So they're supposed to be housing so many people there who came to the area, are in the area to be helping. And we know this is help that people are going to need, especially after we know 3 million people in Florida are without power this morning. And when you look at that roof just ripped off, boy, does it tell you how extensive and dangerous that storm was.
So Hurricane Milton rushed ashore last night about 8:30 p.m.
Sorry about the sneeze.
Oh, okay. I'm like, are you picking your nose?
No, I'm pushing on the lower lip area.
Oh, okay.
So you can
so
not
Aaron
sneeze.
is here with us this morning, and he's tracking the path of Hurricane Milton. And I'm just looking at the radar and satellite here, Aaron, and it kind of looks like this thing is almost done and dusted, but now what's left behind is the problem.
Yeah, and you saw the roof. What kind of surprised, though, that they wanted to house people in Tropicana Field, which the roof is like cloth. Right. And it wasn't going to survive a Category 3 hurricane. So, you look back, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback these storms. But when they had first said that, I was like, it's kind of surprising.
We should point out that there was no one inside at the time when any of this happened.
Or if there were a couple of people that said they touched base with them and they were fine.
Yeah, everyone was fine in there, but just one of those, like a sturdy building, those would be a better choice. But anyway, let's take a look at what's going on with Hurricane Milton right now. Winds of 85 miles per hour. It is well off the East Coast, and it continues to move pretty quickly to the east-northeast at 18 miles per hour. So this storm is going to continue to move away from Florida. We saw the picture of Tampa. Some areas have power, but a lot of folks are without power. A couple million people without power over the Sunshine State right now. There is the center of circulation to the east of Cape Canaveral. Not too well organized as it ran into a lot of shear. And of course, over land, these storms do lose their energy source. So that's what happened as it moved near Orlando over toward Daytona Beach. And now they're picking up the heavy rain and strong winds from Daytona Beach over toward Flagler Beach, also getting some heavy rain and dealing with that storm surge, which will continue, but it will taper off as the morning moves along.
So you're seeing Kelly's comment here. East coast of Florida still getting belted with wind and rain. My family from Florida that I'm with cannot get on their cameras to check in. So she is on a cruise right now. And it was actually moved to Haiti. The captain came on the loudspeaker yesterday, she was telling me, and said, we're extending your vacation a day.
Okay.
We're going to Haiti. All of this to avoid the storm. They obviously are having a lot of trouble getting in touch with other family members. And you're looking live now at New Smyrna Beach, this kind of, right in the center of the state, right?
New Smyrna Beach, yeah. If you went to Orlando and went over to the coast, all the way to the East Coast, go up about half an hour.
Yeah, it's kind of like I just showed on the radar, right? South of Daytona, Flagler Beach is in there as well.
Take a look at those waves.
Yeah, and we just talked about that's the area that's getting hit the hardest right now with the waves and the water being pushed on shore. But the New Smyrna Beach camera still allowing us to see what's going on.
Anytime.
Shonda's right. Like, okay, a beautiful day now on the Gulf Coast. Like these storms that come through and then blow out. And we remember it after Hurricane Ian. Like the next day it was sunny, and you're just looking at all this horrible destruction. Yeah,
I've been checking out a lot of the cameras, a lot of videos coming out from Southwest Florida through Central Florida back to Orlando and now the East Coast. And a lot of damage. They'll have a lot of work to do today.
This is a good question. And I wondered about something similar. Peter's wondering, once the hurricane moves offshore, can hurricanes circulate and hit land again? And what I was questioning was, okay, why does it just fizzle off if it's over water again?
Is it because it pick up its steam again?
Well, that water is going to be cooler, so it needs the warmer water. We're in October. The Gulf is warm, but the Atlantic wouldn't be as warm. And yes, Peter, it could. So I used to teach this class called Severe and Unusual Weather at Buff State, and it was a meteorology course. So all this stuff, like Peter's just asking, does happen. We would put the hurricane plot up from the last 150 years, and they like I said yesterday a lot, they have a mind of their own. They will go and then they'll loop back and then they'll go and hit something else and come back. they'll form kind of wherever they can.
That has a lot to do with water temperature.
The water
though.
temperature is the big thing. And then if there's not a lot of shear, so there's not a lot of winds changing direction with height. And so that kind of lets the hurricane, form.
Wow.
And the warm water, though, that's exactly what you need.
Mark says he's been watching the local news on YouTube. It's so crazy. Don't forget that we actually have a live stream right now of the newscasts in Florida, our sister stations in Tampa, Fort Myers, West Palm Beach. They're all available for you right now in our WKBW app. So if you're interested in checking out what's going on, if you've got an interest in property or friends and family, that's all available for you on that app.
Paula has a question. Paula's wondering, Aaron, if hurricanes are named alphabetically, why is Kirk a next hurricane that they're talking about? Have we heard about Kirk?
No, that might be in the Pacific. No.
And so it might depend on the different areas.
Yeah, so they would have different names and follow, with different, maybe they're a different part of their hurricanes. So yeah, because we're on Milton, then we'll go to N from there. Iron hurricanes, nope. September 11th is actually the peak of hurricane season, and hurricanes are common in October. Hurricane season runs through the end of November. So as long as those water temperatures are generally above 80 degrees, you can have hurricanes, which sometimes will last through the end of November. So no, not, you do have fewer ones in, say, October, but September is the peak month.
Maybe we could go back to this live shot, John, who's back in the newsroom, because that really was an unbelievable scene to see when you consider how fierce those winds were.
Yeah,
wow,
look
at
at
it up close like this.
Just,
it's just like rags hanging on a clothesline.
Just shredded. Yes. And like you said, you can see it's a kind of a cloth roof. So, this Tropicana field's been around for quite some time. I think it was built in the early 90s. When I lived there, we went up to see a game there. And it's you're elevated. You're going to be dealing with stronger winds. And back then, you probably didn't have the same codes where you had to have a building that was, able to sustain winds of, say, 135 or 145, and it sheared the roof off.
Yeah. Yesterday, we were talking about how this could be, well, I mentioned at the top of the show how this is eerily reminiscent to Hurricane Katrina and the Superdome. Obviously, two different structures, but, you see the picture and you're kind of thinking the same thing. But yesterday or the day before, we had mentioned how this was going to be as bad or worse than Hurricane Katrina. What are you seeing?
Well, they both went on shore as a Category 3 hurricane. So Katrina's damage came 24 hours later when the levees broke. So I remember when many of the meteorologists and reporters were like, once again, we dodged, a major event here in New Orleans. Then the levees broke and everything flooded. So that, and also the fact New Orleans is below sea level. So you have these levees that were holding back as much water as they could. They broke, and then 24 hours later, that's when all the damage occurred. Like most of the, that's when the headlines had formed. So it went on. It started the same thing. Was a Category 5, 4, and then went on shore. I believe as a 3. This one went on shore as a Category 3 hurricane as well. So you have those similarities. This one also south of Tampa. So I'm looking at the Tampa Times, and a lot of their headlines were St. Pete and Tampa. The coastline escaped the worst of it, but areas just to the south. You go from, say, Siesta Key to Port Charlotte, that's Charlotte Harbor, which dealt with Charlie in the early 2000s, and then Ian last year with Fort Myers, that Fort Myers Beach area once again. Naples, especially North Naples, dealing with a lot of water that went familiar with Gulf Shore along the shoreline there in Naples. That was underwater
and
yesterday.
It's not even just the flooding too, because as we saw yesterday, there were like more than 100 tornado warnings across the state, and we already saw people on the East Coast dying because of tornadoes.
Or St. Lucie County,
which is all the way over on the East Coast. That's just, look at that.
This is crazy video.
I know, because especially there's one clip that we were talking about before where people are driving down the highway and like the tornadoes right in front of them. You see people just everybody pulling over.
What do you do?
Yeah, you do that, I guess.
You're right. Like you're trying to escape this hurricane that's heading toward you, and now there's a tornado in front of you, and that's very common in hurricanes.
This is it.
Yeah, that is huge.
That is unbelievable.
And then you see all these cars like, you know what? We're going to just go ahead and slide on.
I'm going to hit the brakes and put the flashers on. And
saddest thing about this is that in St. Lucie County, the people who are assumed dead at this point are elderly. They're in a senior living complex or a senior home. And
like a retirement community.
Yeah.
And you know what? They're again, on the other side of the state. So you're not thinking we need to evacuate. You
Right.
know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just now you have to deal with these tornado warnings that come ahead of this.
Really, the weather is just a phenomenon that is so bizarre but fascinating.
Well, you nailed it right there. Like I said, I taught a course called Severe and Unusual Weather because we've had this since forever, and it's going to continue to be like this. It's hurricane season. You're going to get hurricanes, and you live in Tornado Alley.
Right.
You'll have tornadoes. You live in an area that gets hurricanes and the tropics, and this is just a part of the lifestyle. But a lot of people kind of get that false sense of security because Tampa hasn't had a direct hit in almost 100 years, and Miami had Hurricane Andrew in the early 90s, but they've had them come toward it, but nothing major, and the population just changes over so quickly that you don't realize that hurricanes are devastating.
This is kind of, I mean, Lori's saying right. So said I would go through this once and then I'm out of Florida and move someplace else. Like blizzards, winter is kind of like our hurricane season.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we had 47 people die in a blizzard.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully we don't see something of that magnitude. I mean, there are years where there are very few hurricanes and very few devastating hurricanes, but other years we see something like this.
Yes.
Even people from here, like Caitlin, for example, saying this is why her husband says he doesn't want to move to Florida, the hurricane belt. Cindy saying, heard from her family, everybody's okay. So prayers for the damage. So Aaron, today I have to assume everybody who goes out to assess it. First off, we've got first responders who are heading out to try to do rescues that they had to not be able to do because police had called back all of their officers and,
hunkered down.
They couldn't go out because the winds were so bad.
Winds,
So now
it's
they get out
dark. The
today.
worst time for these storms is to make landfall in the middle of the night. So you lose your power, you can't see anything. You have the winds whipping one moment from the west, one moment from the east. You're in the eye of the hurricane. It's a very serious situation. Like you said, they're calling all their first responders back. Now people are waking up, those who have stayed. And, that's another topic too to discuss. But you're waking up and you got to be careful because you could step in a puddle where you don't see there's an active electric line and boom, you're not with us anymore. So and then we talked about too, in that water, like that is murky water. You don't know what's in there between the snakes and the alligators and all the different wildlife. You just have to be very, very careful. You live near the Everglades. I mean, the animals don't, know that your property line starts somewhere.
So I'm still waiting for that call, whether we're going down or staying put. And I
bet
gotta tell you, I'm nervous, and
Don't step in any puddles.
Well, but here's why I'm nervous, because I don't know how to cover a hurricane. Like I know how to cover a snowstorm.
Yeah.
We do this all the time. And I would suspect it's something similar, but there are so many more dangers associated with hurricane damage than a snowstorm.
Right. Well, and I think the thing too is don't make yourself part of the problem.
No,
I think you're going to be able to say, that looks like it's a potentially dangerous situation. I'm going to stay away from it.
The thing is
X,
too,
Y,
now
Z.
people, okay, it's done. And now they're seeing these pictures on every newscast in the country, no matter where they've escaped to and evacuated to. And now you just want to get home. Imagine.
Right.
And now,
you want to see what you're up against.
You want to see, and you need to exercise that patience because they have to make sure it's safe, but you want to get home. And so you understand that. And then you've got Ed in your driveway. Hurricane Ed's blown in,
Hi.
Hey, what's going on here? It's just, there's a lot of aggravation, especially since they've had Helene 2 weeks ago, Ian 2 years ago. And it's just, it really weighs on you psychologically when you get these back to back
As
storms.
you talked to about people getting back down,
thanks,
we
Kit.
know part of the problem was that there wasn't gas at gas stations, right? And so then
we've
they
talked
were
a lot about that.
waiting for the hurricane to blow through to bring in the gas that was sitting at ports because they couldn't transport it across the state.
Yeah, and I say too, when people are coming back, that is also a dangerous situation. Exactly what you just said. There's no gas, no matter what. If you have an electric car or a gas car, you can't get power, so you're just kind of stuck. And then you have that anxiety of wanting to get back. Is the power out? Is my house getting all gross now because of the stuff in the fridge? There are so many variables, and and you just have to. Yeah, like I said, you'll Monday morning quarterback. They'll reassess what to do after the storm when the next one comes.
So Katie, your mom is asking about the guy who stayed in his boat from Ellicottville, and we're just hearing from our producer MB that he did. Is this real? John, or is this something that you're just saying?
Lieutenant
What?
Dan, that guy?
That's not his name. I
Oh,
don't think it's his name.
So the Daily Mail did have a guy. I don't know if this is who my mom's talking about. Here he was. This guy who
Oh, yeah.
stayed in his boat.
Oh, okay.
he
They
was.
were calling him Lieutenant Dan.
That's what they're calling him. And I saw this morning he was fine.
Oh, it's not the guy from Ellicottville. Okay,
no,
I take
right.
it
He
back.
wasn't
Okay,
from
okay,
Ellicottville.
okay.
He was just the guy who stayed in his boat, right? The guy from Ellicottville, remember, he was like, I'm
Yes,
getting out
I'm
after
out.
this
That's why I was
one.
like,
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. So this is from the Daily Mail. A guy better known as Lieutenant Dan refused to obey the evacuation orders, even when the chief of police told him there were shelters open, blah, blah, blah. He stayed in, oh my God. Okay. They call him Lieutenant Dan because he has one leg from Florida.
for
Oh.
Christ's sake.
He had was seen sticking his head out of the boat around 11 p.m., insisting to reporters he was fine. Again, this is coming from the Daily Mail. Posting him on TikTok about how
Well,
he's
this is from
doing.
people, so it's just as good.
There he is, peeking his little head out of the boat.
Oh, for dear Lord.
You
He
know-
said, I saw him get interviewed. I was watching some interviews last night. They were interviewing people staying on their boats. Like, we've made it through a bunch, and I'm going to stay here.
Let me tell you, if
I would get so sick with that boat.
it's that's dangerous. You know, the guy
Yeah.
from Ellicottville hit the
Sick is
pier
the least of your
snapped.
worries, right? Yeah.
So
Oh, wow.
realistically,
That would be the first of my worries.
so you really have to tie your boat down very well. But the concern also at the same time is the water levels. So when you're tying your boat down,
Oh,
with,
yeah.
you
How
know,
much slack to leave and all that?
exactly.
Okay.
So the cleats that you're tying your boat down could rip off your boat. Then you're kind of up the creek, literally.
Well, the Bay of Tampa, the water was being pushed from east to west. So once again, it kind of emptied. Same thing with St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg. So they said there's an area along the water, like the sidewalk where all
Yeah.
the shops are, and they were kind of unscathed because the water went
Yeah.
the other way. But you're right. If you have your boat there, and all of a sudden it goes down, what, 6-8 feet?
Ugh.
I mean, I don't have a boat like you, but I'm learning a lot from you, Edward, and I would imagine that would not be
dangerous.
what you want.
Noreen
Yeah.
says her son and family in Orlando for a dance competition for her granddaughter at Disney. Sure,
Oh.
they're okay. Haven't heard from them yet, though. We
Did hear
spoke.
from Phil.
Yeah, this morning. So my brother-in-law is down there with his family. They had gone for a planned vacation, and they were at a Disney resort, and they ended up just hunkering down. They got extra food because they thought, oh, the power might go out, all this stuff. But they were kind of like assured by the staff there, like they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I
And
bet
we-
Disney knows what they're doing.
Yeah, we talked to them this morning, and they were fine. And again, they're in Orlando,
Yeah,
so
it seemed like they didn't really get much of the
Yeah,
brunt of the storm.
he said he's like, it's going to take a while to clean up the pool. There's branches down. There's things like there's damage. But by the time it went across the state, he was.
Yeah, it was about 85 miles per hour. It went very quickly across the state, so that was a good situation. The heavy rains, though, especially Tampa to Orlando northward. I mean, we saw 17 inches of rain in near Tampa, so that caused a lot of freshwater flooding. So they had a flash flood emergency there in Tampa from freshwater flooding. But the Gulf kind of didn't really cause as much damage there. It's south of that. When we get the drone video later
Yeah.
this morning, we'll start to see the extent in Siesta Key and those barrier islands, like say Sanibel, that a lot of people like to go to.
Can I tell you, it just makes me think, and all of us here, we've dealt with snow. We know that if you have an issue, the kind of process you go through. I start thinking about what people who come back to their homes like that are going to have to deal with when it comes to like homeowners insurance, rebuilding,
Oh.
getting that money to even
Well, the
do
insurance
that.
There's
is
just-
pricing a lot of people there.
I
Yeah.
know. How long does it take to actually get those
Right.
funds?
And this is not an easy process. And like the way the government works, there is a lot of bureaucracy that is just associated with getting those
If
claims.
you've ever had to do anything, you
Of
know what I mean? It
course,
just
yes.
takes time to get through that process. And now you're thinking about all these people.
At the same time, like we're seeing a lot of misinformation that's put out there.
We sure are.
And that's really dangerous.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
People are getting
It's a fruit fly.
those initial checks, right? Like they're
Right.
coming in the mail or they're getting this cash, whatever it is. But there is so much more that needs to be done. And so much of this, like, unfortunately, falls on you personally. Like,
Yeah.
you've got to take action now as a homeowner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway,
Look at
thank
that.
you, Aaron. We appreciate
You're
you.
welcome.
Thanks for tracking all of this.
We have one more story we have to talk about this morning.
How about this one?
I'm going to switch gears a little bit.
In the city of Buffalo, there are big questions this morning about the future of the city of Buffalo Animal Shelter. There are alarms ringing all over the city, people raising red flags.
And these are people who are like insiders.
Correct. Volunteers at the shelter, people who are rescuing dogs, bringing them to the shelter and beyond, all saying conditions inside the shelter are disgusting, deteriorating, and unsanitary.
So what kind of stuff are we talking about?
So,
here?
okay, so I walked in there for myself the other day, and this is what I saw. This one dog in particular, in a dirty cage, pacing around in circles, just in his own poop. And, this isn't just me showing up and being like, oh, dog, walk in circles, or, oh, I'm making him nervous. It looks like he's been doing this. There is feces and urine pooling and piled up on their beds. This one dog has kennel cough, according to the paperwork on the outside of the cage, stuck in a dirty cage. But the thing that alarmed me in particular about this one is that, when you have a dog with kennel cough, you're not supposed to house them with other dogs.
Right. It's very contagious.
And yet they are in the same area with other dogs.
So like, this is not just one of these cages that we're seeing, right? This is like cage after cage after cage, or kennel after kennel after kennel that's having these issues.
And so now there are questions about what happens next. Councilman Mitch Nowakowski, who we have on the show, again, one of my dear friends, just for transparency's sake.
Because he's trying to do something here.
Right. He was asked to go through and take a look before I even got on the case. So he was
on his radar.
Right. This was on his radar. Then it became something that was put on my radar. And so we kind of crossed streams a little bit. What I found out is that he, in doing his own investigation, is now calling for change inside the shelter. And he's demanding answers, is proposing a resolution today with 5 different points, basically looking for accountability and answers by a certain timeline, and for an immediate fix for all of the issues inside.
Okay, so the one guy that you talked to picks up dogs. Like, he just, like, out of the good of his heart, he goes around, and if you follow any of these like lost dog pages, and you guys know I'm on those on Facebook, this guy will always be like, if someone can't go, you know what I mean, or get the dog, he's like, let me go check it out. He'll grab the dog, he'll bring him like to the animal shelter, he'll bring him out here, wherever, to a safe place. So he was the one who said, the people who are cleaning this shelter and keeping it like somewhat organized are the volunteers.
Right. And let me tell you
They're
saddest
not there
part.
all the time.
Right. The saddest part about all of this is that the volunteers are concerned that their program is going to be cut, and that this is a scare tactic that's being used to kind of get them in line.
To not speak out.
Right. And they are suffering right now because they care so deeply about these animals.
You know what? It's really hard. Okay, so you can try to get people to not speak out, but it's hard to deny footage where you actually see what's happening in there.
So who is running this place? Believe it or not, the shelter falls under the Department of Public Works. And, you're thinking like, okay, like what a random department to deal with.
Well, and not where in theory you would think it would go.
Right.
Yes. And probably, I don't know. There's a lot. When you think about public works, like think about what they actually do. We're talking about streets. We're talking about snow
plowing,
removal.
right.
We're talking about all of these
sanitation,
things.
garbage.
So there's a lot that falls under that umbrella.
And so, when you compare the garbage pickup and the snow removal to living animals, you're kind of seeing like, okay, like something doesn't make sense here, and something's going to fall to the wayside. And what is it? It's the animals. And so that's basically what Mitch was saying. And he said that this has gone unnoticed and unfunded and uncovered for far too long, and he is demanding change. So what happens next? Someone's gonna, have to answer to this. But they are very upset. Cindy says no one should treat animals like this. They're very upset with the leadership, and the volunteers just need help.
Well, and so a way you can help, I'm sure we're going to, of course, follow this story and see what happens and who takes responsibility here. But, they're always calling for not only volunteers, but fosters, to come and help, and
overcrowded,
or come adopt if you can,
So John just dropped a link to my story in the comments here. Check it out, share it around, because realistically, the only way change happens is if
you push for it. Yeah.
So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Mary says DPW runs so many departments that it's not their wheelhouse, like the cafeteria in City Hall.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's true. So that's kind of something that Mitch is going to take a look at and see if
should this be falling under somebody else's.
Right.
Yeah. Because you don't want stuff like that to fall by the wayside. And we know that if there's too much under an umbrella, like occasionally that can happen.
Julie says maybe it's a good thing we get a new mayor. I hope the horses don't get treated that way. She's talking about OTB. and of course, their wheelhouse is horse racing. Anyway, we got to get the show on the road here.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Tomorrow's Friday, so we're looking ahead to that.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Bye.